Good morning and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR, and we're very excited about today's guest. We're welcoming to the program for the first time ever, Jeff Lindner with the Harris County Flood Control District. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, good morning. Hope everybody's having a good day today.
Absolutely. We're so excited to have you here this morning to talk to us about everything we need to know to prepare for this hurricane season. And we're going to get into a lot of tips. You have resources for us that we'll be sharing towards the end. So we're really excited. But before we get into all of that, if you would, Jeff, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, I'm a meteorologist for Harris County. I actually work for the Harris County Flood Control District, which is a department within the Harris County system. This is my 19th year in May, so I've been doing this for a while. Started before Hurricane Katrina and Rita, went through that. Of course, Hurricane Ike back in 2008, and then all the floods we've had recently and the winter storms and all that kind of stuff. And so it's been a very active career here in this area, but it's something that is very rewarding. Also, the amount of stuff you're able to put out to help people get ready for things and to be there when they need that information so they can make decisions.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. We've had, unfortunately, plenty of events that have taken place that I'm sure have prepared you for everything that you're going to share with us today. So we do appreciate your service. And you were actually a very calming voice during Hurricane Harvey, which I know is still fresh in a lot of our minds. How were you able to keep it together so well and remain so calm during that time?
Yeah, it's a question I get asked all the time, and Harvey was really no different than any other of the storms we've dealt with. Just it was just obviously on a bigger scale, and it lasted longer than some of the other events that we've had to deal with. The fastest storm I ever worked was actually Memorial Day 15. I literally walked into the Emergency Operations Center. That was a holiday. Walked into the Emergency Operations Center, and within 15 minutes, we were under a flash flood warning, and then within an hour, we had a flash flood emergency. And so, you know, not that we didn't know it was the potential was there, but for Harvey, there was lots of buildup for that. We knew there was a storm coming. Obviously, it was a hurricane, and so there was all the lead up to it, and so we were very prepared for Harvey. But it's interesting because you can be prepared. You can, as a meteorologist, you're sitting there talking about 20, 30, 40 inches of rain, which is well beyond anything we've ever forecasted before. And then when it starts to happen, it's kind of almost surreal. It's this, every single watershed, the reservoirs, all the counties around us, is just the magnitude of Harvey was so much greater than anything we'd ever faced before.
Yeah. Well, we all appreciated everything that you did for us during that time. And there was actually a GoFundMe that was set up in your honor. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, when everything was happening, I didn't even realize it had been set up. A person had set it up on whatever day it was, and it was a couple days later that our communications person that was working with me during Harvey made me aware of it. And of course, it's very generous. It raised a lot of money, and obviously that was returned to the flood victims across the area. But something I would never have expected to happen. And just ever since then, this year's the 5 years. The end of August this year is 5 years since Harvey. And even still today, people come up and thank me and everything. And like I say, I was just doing what I needed to do and just doing kind of my job at that point, to make sure the information was getting out. Because I think in really big disasters, if it's Harvey or the winter storm or whatever, people need information, and they need accurate, timely information so they can make whatever decisions they need to make to protect themselves and their families and their property.
Yes. Well, again, thank you for that work that you do. So let's talk a little bit about it. Again, Harvey gave a lot of people anxiety when it comes to hurricane season. Again, you said it was 5 years ago, but it's still so fresh in our minds. What major flood control projects have been completed since Harvey, and are there any other projects that are currently underway?
Yeah, there's tons of projects going on out there. Of course, in 2018, the flood control district passed, well, the voters passed the 2.5 billion dollar bond referendum that resulted in the starting of at least 240 flood control projects across Harris County. So these are projects that range from widening channels and deepening channels to increasing the number and sizes of detention basins. So these are the basins that temporarily store storm water when we get really heavy rains,
Mhm.
and then also property acquisition, making sure we have the amount of right of way we need for not only now but in the future for doing additional projects. Obviously, as development continues across our region, and then also in some cases. Property acquisition for homes that are very deep in the floodplain. So these are houses that flood a lot. They tend to be your lowest homes, and even if we did infrastructure projects, they probably would still flood. And so, the
Mhm.
best solution for those areas is to remove those properties, remove those homes from the floodplain, and let that area go back to nature. And so, there's a lot of work being done. There's a lot of work to be done. The other side of that is the more infrastructure you put out there, the more you have to maintain, and that all costs additional dollars and money to maintain this in the long run. So that goes to our mowing cycles that we do. It goes to repairs that happen when we do have floods and heavy rain. We have erosion, we have culverts that can fail, we have all that kind of stuff, and so it goes into the maintenance part of it. And just to kind of give you an idea of the type of dollars and money we're talking about here, if we were to bring 100-year flood protection to Harris County, we're talking about 40 to 45 billion dollars. That's with the
Wow.
B. And so, the 2.5 billion was a start, but there's certainly a lot more work to be done, and we are starting to look at other solutions now. We've had a lot of conversations about tunnels, and
Mhm.
moving water very quickly underground out of this area. There seems to be some um, traction with the tunnel system potentially now. The first part was, can we even do that here? With our water table and our soils, is it even possible to do it? And the answer is yes.
Mhm.
It looks like it can be done. Then it starts to get into a funding issue, and to build some of the tunnels we're looking at probably around $30 billion to move water effectively underground. And these would be tunnels. These are massive tunnels. We're talking about 40 by 40 and about 150 feet below the surface of the ground. And so, obviously, that's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Obviously, at the end of that tunnel, you have to pump that water out and remove it because you're so far below the surface. And so, we're starting to look at other solutions now than that's a little bit different than what we've been doing the last several decades of
Mhm.
mainly the infrastructure out there on the ground that people can see. And so we'll see how that all goes. There's a report on our website you can go and look at that talks about the tunnel potential in this area.
Great. And we can share the link to your website in the comments as well. So, with all that, do you believe that Harris County is prepared for a major flood event or more prepared than we were in 2017?
I would say we're definitely better off than we were, and it's not so much because of Harvey. It's because there has been projects that have been going on for decades that weren't completed before Harvey that are now completed. So, for example, Project Braze is one of those projects, which is through the Meyerland Texas Medical Center area. That's where Braze Bayou runs. And the flood protection has been increased there. It's not eliminated, and I think that's a really important point to make. A lot of people, they hear the word project and oh, the flood control district has done this, and they think their flood risk is completely gone. And what the way we say it is, we build flood damage reduction projects, risk reduction
Mm.
projects, so reducing the risk. We're never going to be able to eliminate the risk, and so that's one thing to make sure folks understand in this area. If we had Harvey again today, a lot of homes are still going to flood.
Mhm.
That's the simple fact is that the amount of water that was dropped for Harvey, and even if you look at some of the other storms, Tax Day and Memorial Day,
Mhm.
that's a tremendous amount of water to be dropped on our system in a short period of time, and so it just overwhelms our system. The good news is, if you look back in history, back in the 70s and 80s, 3 to 4 inches of rain used to cause flooding. 5 or 6 inches of rain used to cause structure flooding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that would be pretty rare today. So we really have to get up around that 7, 8, 9 inch amount to see structure flooding in Harris County now. And so all of these improvements over the decades have kind of made a gradual difference. But that doesn't mean we can't flood. And when we get 15 or 20 inches of rain or 5 or 6 inches of rain in a couple of hours, we're going to have issues here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So we hear this a lot, staying weather aware is key. What tools does your department offer local residents to monitor the bayous and streams?
Yeah, so one of our biggest tools is our flood warning system, and this is a region-wide system. We have a number of gauges all the way from up north in Lake Livingston, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, all the way out to Fort Bend County and Waller counties, and then over towards Galveston Bay. And so it's a region-wide system, and this network of gauges does both reports the water level in real time, how high the water is getting in the creeks and the bayous, and also the amount of rain that we're seeing. And so there's a number, I think about 300 gauges we now have across the region. And with part of that, with that system, we also have what we call real-time inundation mapping. And so this is showing you the footprint of what is actually flooding from the creek or the bayou when it comes out of its banks. And so that is something we have developed since Harvey. So you don't necessarily have to know the elevation of your home. If you look at the gauge and it says 54 feet and you don't know if the elevation of your home is 55 or 56, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
You can just look at that graphic, the inundation graphic, and it shows you that footprint of where their water is. And that updates about every 15 to 20 minutes when we are having flooding. If you go look at something like today, it's obviously not going to show anything. But you can go back and look historically if you want to go back and look at Tax Day or Memorial Day or any of the other floods we've had recently. We do have those historic maps online, so you can just type in the date and time and it'll show you what the footprint of the flooding was at that time. The other thing, I think you have a slide for this, is we do have those notifications now. So another big thing we heard during Harvey was I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to get information. And of course, all of us now utilize our cell phones a lot to get these types of notifications. And you can go to fwsalerts.org. You can sign up. These are automatic notifications that come directly from the gauge site. So you can sign up for the rainfall portion, or you can sign up for the water level portion. You can sign up for both. You can sign up for the 2 or 3 gauges near your house, or you can sign up for all the gauges. I don't know if I'd recommend that. You get a lot of notifications, but this is really a great way to get this either to your cell phone or your email. And this will one of the things that I use it for is just to let me know, not necessarily how bad things are because I'm watching at that point, to let me know, on an afternoon when it's sunny like this in the morning and we have these pop-up thunderstorms in the afternoon and it rains 4 inches in an hour somewhere, it's, hey, this is happening. And so it's kind of that first line notification of there could be some issues in these areas. And I think that's really what listening and listening to what people want. They just want that notification of something's happening. And so you do have to go in there and create an account and all that, and then you pick which gauges you want and the information you want. And you can customize it. So if you wanted to know when Bray's Bayou at Rice or White Oak Bayou at Lakeview is half full, you can get a text message sending you that too. So I think that's one of the very forward-facing things we've kind of done over the last few years is getting that information directly out there to the people so they can make decisions.
That's excellent. Well, Jeff, we know the tropics are a little quiet right now, but as you said, these flood events can happen very quickly, and that's why we're excited that we have those notifications now. But what can we be doing right now to prepare, even though it might be quiet?
Now's the time you need to prepare, and I know it's really hard to even think about hurricanes, even though we're in hurricane season that runs from the first part of June 1, all the way through the end of November. Texas is really first part of June through about mid-October. We don't have a lot of tropical activity here after mid-October, but we do have to be ready in June. We've had storms in June. Obviously, Tropical Storm Allison back in 2001 was in June. We've actually Hurricane Audrey back in 1957. A Category 4 hurricane into Sabine Pass this week of June. And so we can get big storms in June here in Texas. And so we do have to be ready, and it's making sure you have a plan, you have a kit. Are you in an evacuation area? And this is an evacuation area from storm surge, as the seawater flooding. Those areas potentially could be asked to evacuate in a storm. And so it's making sure you have that plan. What are you going to do if you are leaving? Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there? All that type of stuff. Having your items that you're going to take somewhat, not necessarily packed up, but know where they're at, know how to get to them quickly. And then if you're going to be staying and sheltering in place, that's kind of a different plan. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have the non-perishable foods, the water, the batteries, the charger packets to charge your cell phone, which obviously we're all going to be tied to because we're going to lose power, and cash. A lot of things are not going to work. ATM machines and credit card things like that are not going to work after a storm, and so
Mm-hmm.
you're going to need cash even if you're going to go out and buy like a bag of ice or something. And so it's having all that put together, and it's also making sure the plan fits you. So there's lots of information out there about what everybody needs and all this and that. Do you have younger kids? Make sure you have stuff for them to do. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
pets? Make sure you have supplies for your pets. And so it's about building that plan for you specifically and for your family specifically. Medications are another big one, especially if you're leaving the area and you might get low on medications. It's not sometimes easy to get those refilled outside of the area, and so making sure you have that information and what they are. We saw this actually during the Hurricane Laura evacuation from Lake Charles. We had some folks over in our area that were being sheltered here, and they had a bunch of medication, but they're all very similar. If you look at medication, it's all white and blue and whatever. And so a white pill that's the size of your pinky finger doesn't mean a whole lot when you're trying to explain what kind of medications you're on. And so having that all written down now
Mm-hmm.
is really good and really important. Um, and just being prepared. And what I say by that is a lot of the same stuff you put in a kit that you can go to the store and kind of slowly purchase now over time is the same thing you can use if we had, like, for example, the winter storm.
Mm-hmm.
Loss of power and that type of stuff is going to result in kind of those same activities taking place, regardless if it's summertime or wintertime. And one of the things I kind of recommend is as you go to the store, pick up an extra case of water, pick up an extra package of batteries and that type of stuff. So then you have it, and it's already there because, as we all know, we are struggling at some times with supply issues right now, and so there might not be some of this stuff available when you need it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is definitely on preparing your home. Making sure you have your insurance and your policy. Flood insurance is a big one, and I think we'll probably talk some more about that. But flood insurance is really, really important around here.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure you have that policy in place, and then also just making sure you have some basic materials to do some very basic repairs if you have to. So some bags and some tarps to potentially put over your roof if you do lose some shingles, or if one of your windows breaks, or if your garage door blows in, or anything like that. And then obviously in the aftermath, just that cleanup type stuff of
Mm-hmm.
removing tree limbs and picking things up around the yard. And so, one of the things I think we learned the most from Harvey and some of the other big floods is that it's going to be at the very street level that a lot of this stuff is going to happen. It's street by street, cul-de-sac by cul-de-sac, where people are going to get together and form in these little groups and kind of help each other out. Because for a big hurricane like Laura, or like we saw with some of the other events, it's going to take time, and the overwhelming effect of the first responders in this region for an event of that magnitude. And we saw that sort of with Harvey. It's going to take time for help to get into some areas, and you could be potentially on your own for 4 or 5 days
Mm-hmm.
and need those supplies.
Okay. I would love to hear in the comments ways that our viewers are preparing for hurricane season, or things that you typically do to prepare for hurricane season. I know myself, my family, we actually live in Galveston County, about a quarter mile from Clear Creek. So we're always prepared. We actually prepare two ways. We prepare to stay, and we prepare in the event that we need to, as you said, leave at the last minute. So I would love to hear some of the ways that our viewers are preparing and have prepared for hurricane season already. So type those into the comments. Also, if you have questions for Jeff, I still have a few questions for him, but if you have questions for Jeff, please type those in and we'll get to those as well. Excuse me. So Jeff, how can people see their home's risk of flooding?
Yeah, we do have a website. It's called Flood Education Mapping Tool. You can go to the Harris County Flood Control District website, hcfc.org, and just go to our interactive pages, and you can type in your address, and it shows you how close you are, where your property falls with the floodplains in the area. One thing I'll say is we all have a flood risk. So regardless if you're in a floodplain or not, and this is really important, especially in the line of work that y'all do, where you're meeting with people, and some people may ask, hey, is this house in a floodplain? Has it flooded before? Everybody has a flood risk. That's the answer. That is the answer here. Everybody has a flood risk. If it can rain on your house can flood. That's not the answer people want to hear, but that's the answer we have. And so obviously the properties in the floodplains have a higher flood risk. And really the thing to keep in mind about the flood insurance maps is that they're a rate map. They really determine how much you're going to pay for your flood insurance. So outside of those higher risk areas, you're going to pay lower, anywhere from about $400 to $500 per year. Inside those high risk areas, it's going to be potentially significantly higher. But the biggest reason that I say everybody has a flood risk is because 50 to 60% of our structure flooding actually has nothing to do with the creeks and the bayous. And that's where our floodplains are mapped from. It has to do with our underground drainage system. So that's the pipes that drain the water from the roads. Once those pipes are full, and on average, they can handle about 2 inches of rain in an hour. Once they're full, there's nowhere for the water to go. And so the water builds up in the streets. And if it gets high enough, it can seep into the homes. And again, about 60% of our flooding comes from that type of flooding. Their homes are not in mapped floodplains or any of that. A lot of these folks don't have flood insurance. So if you look at Harvey, and everybody's, well, it's Harvey. But if you look at Harvey, 68% of the homes that flooded were outside the 100-year floodplain. They were not required to have flood insurance. If you look at Tropical Storm Imelda, 2 years after that, 65% of the homes that flooded were outside the 100-year floodplain. And a lot of what happened with both these two storms and the other storms is the rainfall rate. Where you're getting 5 or 6 inches of rain in an hour, it's greatly exceeding the ability of our underground drainage systems to carry that water to the creek or the bayou. And so we do get that flooding. This tends to be in the older areas. These are the areas that were built back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So kind of inside the beltway system-ish. Those are the areas where we tend to see that ponding and sheet flow flooding that I'm talking about. And it tends to be very hodgepodge. So you could go down the street and you could have a street of 20 homes, and you'll have 5 or 6 homes that flood, and it's kind of one here, one there. It tends to be very shallow flooding, an inch or two. But any water obviously in a home is damaging. And so everybody should have flood insurance. Everybody should have flood insurance. And it's not just a Harris County thing. It's for all the counties. Everybody along the Gulf Coast, really everybody everywhere should have flood insurance. But the thing is, only 36% of the folks in this county have it. That's it. 36% of our residents have flood insurance. And so the difference from a flood insurance payout for Harvey versus a non-flood insurance payout. So if you had flood insurance, the average payout was about $120,000. If you did not and you got assistance from FEMA, the average payout was about $8,000. So try to imagine putting your house back together for $8,000.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, I was speaking to a realtor recently, and they told me when a consumer asks them, does this neighborhood flood? They said their standard answer, any neighborhood in the area, they said it could. So I recommend that you get flood insurance. So tell us a little bit about just what's the best time to purchase flood insurance? And I think you already answered this, but do homeowners who don't reside in a floodplain need flood insurance?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Everybody should have flood insurance. And again, it's not just a Harris County thing. If you're in Washington County, if you're in Chambers County, if you're in Liberty County, everyone should have flood insurance. And the reason I say this is When that day comes, and it will come at some point, when that day comes where it rains 20 or 30 inches over your house, the drainage system is not going to be able to handle it, and you're going to flood. And I've heard this time and time and time again of my house was never flooded. I've lived here 40 or 50 years.
Hmm.
You have to understand that 40 or 50 years is a very small amount of time when we're talking about what can happen in an area. And so, yes, you've lived there for a long time and you haven't flooded, but that doesn't mean you can't flood. And I can't tell you the number of people that flooded in tax day and
Hmm.
then dropped their flood insurance. They thought it was a one time thing and they dropped their flood insurance April of 2017, 1 year after tax
Mm.
day. And then Harvey happened August of 2017 and they flooded again and they yet again were not covered. And so it's really, really important. You go through your insurance agent. Um, Really, you can get flood. You should get flood insurance any time of year. It's good to do it. Any time of year, anytime you renew any type of policies, just make sure your flood insurance renews. It's a yearly renewal.
Hmm.
It takes 30 days to go into effect. So, for example, you're not covered for 30 days. If you move into a new house, it's 30 days for that policy to go into effect. And so I've heard stories where people moved into homes and they have flooded within that 30 days and they're not
Hmm.
covered. And so you have to understand that the sooner you can get that policy in place, the better off you are. And then no policies are written when there's a named storm in the Gulf of Mexico. And so you
Hmm.
can't, oh, there's a storm in the Gulf, let me get the policy and then I'll drop it or cancel it afterwards. It doesn't work like that. And FEMA has really become more strict on flood insurance over the course of the last couple of years, mainly because of the repetitive loss nature we have here. So
Hmm.
the payouts for homes flooding 10 and 15 times, those days are over.
Hmm.
If your structure floods 2 or 3 times, FEMA starts to kind of warn you that if it floods one more time, they're going to drop your policy. Those
Wow.
policies will be dropped because it's not sustainable to keep paying out these big premiums for homes that flood over and over and over again. So.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So we had a few questions that came in from our viewers. Connie said, "Do you have a hurricane preparedness list that you can share?"
So you can go to readyharris.org, and I think there's a list. I think we had a list of sites that we can go to, and so readyharris.org is a great resource. It's for Harris County Office of Emergency Management. Also, the National Weather Service has a great booklet. It's an online booklet. You can go to their website and get that booklet. And both of those resources, and if you live outside of Harris County, if you live in Galveston County or Fort Bend County, every county has kind of their own, uh, emergency management website, Office of Emergency Management website, or even the city emergency management website. You can go to there and have the list. TV stations do a good one also.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how many actually have physical booklets anymore at the grocery store, but you can go to the websites and get them. And so just remember, it's going to be a very generic type list. It's going to be kind of everything for everybody, and make sure that you take that kind of generic type list and then build it for you specifically, for your situation specifically, and for your family situation specifically. So there's tons of resources out there. FEMA also has some very generic type lists you can use, and if you use a couple of those, you'll have the majority of stuff you need. If you haven't been through a hurricane here before and you know someone who has, your neighbors or somebody like that, ask them because they'll tell you the lessons learned.
Hmm.
After going through it, you'll sit there and you're like, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, and most people are more than happy to tell you how things were in the past storm and all that kind of stuff.
That's great. Great advice. And I always enjoy, again, I live in Galveston County. I have the creek right down the street. But anytime I'm listening to you or any other expert talk about hurricane preparedness, I always pick up something. And today, you mentioned having supplies for minor repairs. I hadn't even thought about that. So I'm going to be sending my husband to the hardware store later for that. Do we also just had a question. You mentioned supply chain issues could potentially, do you think that this will impact how we prepare for hurricane season? Are there specific items that we should maybe go purchase now or order now?
Yeah, every week is a different issue with something. I go to the store just like everybody else, and sometimes there'll be water there, and sometimes there won't be water, and sometimes there'll be this, and sometimes it won't be that. And so, my suggestion is, instead of waiting to find out what we're going to have an issue with, because I don't know if we really know, is to go out there and start purchasing that stuff now. You don't have to go buy it all today, or like I said, every time you go to the store, pick up a case of water, a jug of water, pick up some extra batteries, pick up some canned goods. This stuff is going to stay good from now through October or so, and then
Hmm.
reach October and we haven't used it, go ahead and use it up. It's all stuff we use anyways, and so go ahead now and kind of purchase that stuff, and then if there is an issue, because like I said, we really don't know what potentially the issue could be. If there is an issue, you already have it. The other thing
Hmm.
that's going to save you is you're not going to have to stand in line as much at the store and all that when everybody else is standing in line. And so, purchasing some of this stuff ahead of time is a good thing. I know when you start talking about lumber and stuff like that to board up windows, it's pricey right now.
Hmm.
I could potentially see some issues there with that, and so if you want to go do that, now's a good time to do it. Once you cut that wood, one thing to keep in mind around here, we don't use it very often. I think probably most of us, the last time we used it was with Hurricane Ike, maybe a
Hmm.
few for Hurricane Laura. Make sure you're storing it flat, laying down, and not standing up because of our humidity. That wood will bow, and so when you go out and try to put it up against the window and put it in,
Hmm.
it won't work. It's been standing up, and so lay it flat if you can. And so, obviously that's another thing. Once you do it and you cut it, it's good. You don't have to go repurchase that or anything. And that's
Hmm.
one thing I'll say about windows. They need to be covered either with plywood or shutters, especially down in those coastal areas right near the coast. Tape does absolutely nothing. That's kind of like a myth. It's the same thing of like opening your window in a tornado. The tornado doesn't care if your window's open or not. Our homes are not airtight, so that this whole concept of the pressure difference blowing up a house doesn't happen. The pressure equalizes. It's actually the wind driven debris and the wind itself that destroys the home. And so, if you can think of a two by four going at 100 miles an hour, duct tape on a window is not going to stop that.
Right.
Those windows need to be covered with something, especially down on the coast. Down in those areas where the wind's coming in over the water, and you're going to get that into the windows and the roofs.
Okay, very good. We had another question from one of our members, Kristen. She said, "Can you give any preview as to what we are expecting this year for hurricane activity?"
Yeah, so it does look like another busy season. The last two seasons have been extremely busy. We've exhausted both years the list of names we have, 21 named storms, and so this season looks to be very active again. Obviously, being active does not equate to getting hit. We saw that in 2020 and 2021. We were very fortunate here in Texas. Unlike our friends just our east in Louisiana, the state of Louisiana had six storms strike their state in 2020. And so it just really depends on how things set up, where the storms track, especially as we get into August and September. But we are looking for anywhere from 14 to 21 named storms. That's a tropical storm, 40-mile-per-hour winds or greater. 6 to 10 hurricanes, that's winds of 75 miles per hour or greater. And then of those, 3 to 6 becoming what we call major hurricanes,
Mm.
and that's 115 miles per hour or greater. And so, again, it looks fairly favorable for storms down in the Caribbean this year. The Caribbean's been kind of quiet in the recent years, and so we all get a little bit nervous when the Caribbean's active because those storms tend to somehow make it up and toward the Gulf of Mexico. And obviously, once a storm is in the Gulf, it's going to hit somewhere. So it's
Hmm.
sort of landlocked in there. It's going to hit somewhere. One thing to keep in mind for your preparations and all that is, when for those of you who went through Rita and Ike, we had the 5 days, we had 120 hours, and in government, we always drill and prepare on this 120-hour timeline, and so you kind of step through this. You have all this time. The fact is that the majority of storms form and hit the coast in less than 120 hours, less than 5 days.
Hmm.
So for Texas, 75% of the hurricanes that have hit Texas have formed and hit our state in 60 hours or less.
Wow.
And so you're not always going to have 4 and 5 days to get ready. You're not always going to have it and see it coming from off of Africa or out of the Caribbean or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Of the four Category 5 hurricanes that have hit the U.S., so we only had four going back to 1851. Of those four, all four were tropical depressions 72 hours before landfall. So wrap that around your head, and you're thinking there's a tropical depression in the Gulf of Mexico, and 3 days later it's a Category 5 hurricane.
Mm.
And think of your decision process. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's very hard, even for us in decision making roles, it's very hard to wrap your head around. Well, is it really going to get to that level? Is it really going to be that bad? Because right now it's a tropical depression. It's a much easier decision process when it's already the Category 4 hurricane coming.
Mm-hmm.
You see it coming; it's already there, and you can make those decisions. I think those decisions have become a lot easier. But if you look at historically how these big storms have happened, they're not that very long in advance of making landfall, and so just keep that in mind. You're not always going to have the 4 and 5 days. You may only have a day or two to get ready, which emphasizes again the importance of having that stuff in place early and now.
Absolutely. All the more reason to be prepared in advance. Well, very good. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, Jeff, you've shared a lot of great, valuable information with us. I know that we did have some resources that I do want to just pop up on the screen for everybody. If you want to tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so those are some of those websites I mentioned. Ready Harris or any of your local emergency management agencies. You can get information for your county. The bottom two there are the National Weather Service for weather information and forecast. So this would be specific information for our area, the counties locally here in Southeast Texas, and then of course the National Hurricane Center where you get that forecast from. Then I think we had a slide that showed kind of that preparation information and all of that. We talked about flood insurance. We talked a little bit about all the different things you need. One thing I'm going to talk about a little bit more is trusted sources. So there's lots of places you can get information. There's lots of stuff now, especially on social media, about the forecast and the models, and the models are always producing this and that and everything else. Just be really careful of what you're seeing and everything. Make sure you're getting that information from your trusted sources especially when it comes to making decisions. On a day like today where there's nothing out there, and 14 days from now there's a model showing something. Most of the stuff we don't even get concerned about unless it's in about 7 days. And so all this sharing of this model stuff 15 and 16 days out is really just in la la land. And even us as meteorologists don't put a lot of stock into it, but it gets shared and it gets people, worked up. And it causes a lot of unnecessary concern. And we really need people to pay attention when there's actually something that's threatening. And so it's making sure you're following those, your local National Weather Service office, your emergency managers, your local elected officials, local TV meteorologists. Those are all great resources to get that trusted information, accurate information, because you want to make sure whatever decision you're making is based on really good and accurate information, and not just a model run of something. And I don't tell people don't look at the models, because as soon as you say that, they're going to go look at them. Feel free to look at the models. Just understand that they change 4 times a day. So they're run 4 times a day, and they can change widely. So one time it could show a storm hitting Brownsville. The next time it could be in Tampa. And so just understand that, and understand that there's biases inherited sometimes in some of these models, which is why it's best to go with the official National Weather Service and Hurricane Center forecast.
Well, that makes sense. Well, Jeff, is there anything else that you want to share with our members today?
I think we've covered a lot, and especially in the realm of work y'all are in, where you could take some of this information and talk to people, especially when it comes to the flood insurance and the flood threat that we all have here. People always ask, "Well, has this home flooded before?" No, it hasn't flooded before. That doesn't mean it can't flood in the future. And just making those statements, and I understand people are trying to sell homes and all that type of stuff, but on the other end, once they're in that house, is to make sure they're protected as much as possible from damages that can be caused from flooding. And so just understanding the risk we face in this area, not only from flooding, but from all of the hurricanes and the wind and all that, and sort of trying to convey that out there and into a way, because I can reach however many people we have on here today, but there's 5 point something million people in this region, and how do we reach all of them, and how do we make sure they understand the risks they face here, and to make sure they're covered and prepared for it. And I think that's a really great thing about this, is you become the force multiplier by taking this information and getting it out there.
Absolutely. So share this information with your sphere of influence, share it with your customers, with your clients, and encourage them to purchase flood insurance. Well, again, Jeff, thank you so much for your time this morning. This has been wonderful. We've got a lot of comments saying that this was great information, so we truly appreciate your time. We will be back on July 11th. We are taking a little bit of a summer break with the 4th of July coming up. So we'll be back on July 11th with HR Strategic Architect Jeremy Conway and HR Consultant Jim Sherry. As we know, there's a lot of headlines going around the real estate industry right now, a lot of major changes happening, and especially with the changes with the economy as well and everything going on there. So they're going to give us an industry update and an industry forecast, what to expect for the rest of this year and beyond in the real estate industry. So again, Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. We truly appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that is it for this Member Focus Monday. We'll see you all again on July 11th. Have a great one. Bye-bye.